Our first trip takes us to Fort Campbell. Located in both Kentucky and Tennessee, we went in search of the story behind the name, and what we uncovered were some interesting facts. Two-thirds of Fort Campbell is located in Tennessee. The other third, it spans across the state border into Kentucky. There's a story about the official address for Fort Campbell and the change that occurred in the early days. John O'Brien gave us the history.
When the fort was originally, or the camp as it was called then, was originally constructed, the survey crew and most of the construction crews were headed out of Clarksville, Tennessee, and everybody assumed that the name was going to be Camp Campbell, Tennessee. The headquarters of the installation is on the Tennessee side of the state border, but when they laid the installation out, the post office ended up one block on the Kentucky side. And this caused a lot of confusion for the U.S. Post Office, and after 3 months, because of the location of the post office, the War Department changed the name officially to Camp Campbell, Kentucky.
Fort Campbell actually began in 1941, during the time that the United States began preparing for war.
So a survey was conducted here in the local area by a civilian construction firm, and they had a list of criteria for what area would make a good place to build one of these mobilization camps, and the area that they picked out straddled the Kentucky-Tennessee border. They did all of the survey work that was necessary, and that's all they had the money to do. They didn't have the money to buy and build the camp, buy the land and build the camp. So they actually finished their survey on the 15th of November, 1941, closed up all their blueprints and put them on the shelf. One of those real ironies of history, that was the same day that the Japanese imperial staff briefed Emperor Hirohito about the Pearl Harbor plan. And that's what brought us into World War II. So on the 16th of November, the Japanese fleet weighed anchor and headed for Pearl Harbor, and of course 7 December is when they conducted their attack. And very shortly after that, on 6 January 1942, because war had been declared, the War Department said, pull those plans off the shelf and build that camp.
The government purchased 102,000 acres of land that was called the Black Patch.
This was a very rural area, and it also did not have electrification at the time. So living here in 1940 was a lot like living here in 1840.
The Army named the post after William Bowen Campbell, originally naming it Camp Campbell.
The War Department would allow local people to submit suggestions, and from the suggested names, the War Department would pick the name. William Bowen Campbell was a Tennessean, a very, very famous Tennessean. He served with the Tennessee Volunteer Regiment in the Seminole War as a captain. He served in the Tennessee Volunteer Regiment as the colonel of the regiment in the Mexican-American War. He was a very senior commander in that war, and he met all kinds of people that were going to be very important in the Civil War. Captain Robert E. Lee and Lieutenant U.S. Grant. And one of his fellow regimental commanders was none other than the commander of the Mississippi Volunteer Rifles, Jefferson Davis. Campbell, when he wasn't serving with the Tennessee Volunteers, served in Tennessee as a member of the state legislature. He was twice elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. After the Mexican-American War, he was elected the governor of the state of Tennessee from 1852 to 1854.
The first troops arrived in July of 1942, and the camp quickly became one of the major armor training centers in the country. The Army put $35 million into the project, and by the end of 1942, the surrounding areas began to grow. The closest town of Clarksville more than doubled in size. By 1945, 250,000 soldiers had trained at Camp Campbell. After the war, many soldiers left the area, especially since the post had been built as a temporary training center. However, the military established the Clarksville base in 1947. This was a highly restricted area for the preparation of nuclear weapons. Then, when the 3rd Infantry Division arrived in 1948, the base began being used as an Army facility. The 11th Airborne Division followed, and in 1956, when the unit was moved to Germany, the 101st Airborne moved in.
Fort Campbell became Fort Campbell in 1950, and Fort indicates that it's a permanent feature.
In 1988, Fort Campbell brought in 2 elite units, the 5th Special Forces and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment.
The 5th U.S. Special Forces Group Airborne, the Green Beret, that's about a 1,200-man organization who specialize in the languages and cultures of the Middle East and Central Asia. Since 9/11, they have been very busy. And the 3rd major tenant unit that we have here is Task Force 160, the Special Operations Aviation Regiment, about an 1,800 men and woman unit that are the specially trained and equipped helicopter aviators that fly for our Special Operations Forces. Since 9/11, they've been deployed almost constantly also.
Now you can visit the Don F. Pratt Museum and see over 3,000 artifacts on display.
We tell our soldiers who come here that we're not a museum. We are the trophy room of those great units. And what we have on display here for people to share with us is our history, our heritage, and our institutional culture.
You'll find the story of the history of Fort Campbell and the items from the 101st Airborne Division's assault into Normandy. And that's just scratching the surface. Now you know the story behind the base that was named after a Tennessee governor. Now you may want to visit Fort Campbell's Don Pratt Museum. We found a lot more treasures than we were able to share. Visit our website at TennesseeTreasures.net to get a treasure map to this location. We'll be back in a moment. You can get all the fascinating stories of Tennessee treasures in a magazine. With colorful pages and unique photos, you'll experience the treasures of the state in print. Packed with trivia and extra information, you'll discover the little-known facts about Tennessee's history, arts, entertainment, sports, general trivia, and geography. Order your subscription by visiting TennesseeTreasures.net. Just $18 plus shipping and handling.